We now have a response from Hamas to the proposal that was put on the table for a way forward. We're looking at it intensely, as is, I know, the government of Israel, and there's a lot of work to be done, but we are very much focused on doing that work and hopefully being able to resume the release of hostages that was interrupted so many months ago.
I appreciate Secretary of State Antony Blinken trying to be optimistic about a deal between Hamas and the Israeli government. And I'm about to give you the details on the latest round of negotiations, but if he seemed a little deflated in that statement, there was good reason for it. Now, Hamas has in fact responded to Israel's hostage deal and ceasefire proposal with their own counterproposal. And despite Secretary of State Antony Blinken taking his 5th trip to the Middle East since October in an effort to strike a deal between Israel and the Palestinians, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already rejected Hamas's counteroffer. Of course he has. Now keep in mind that Hamas had already tempered some of their original demands, including calls for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. Their latest offer to Israel included hostage releases in 3 phases, an initial 45-day pause in fighting, and eventually, the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. The first phase of the ceasefire would include the release of hostages in Gaza, including women and children under 19 years old who aren't enlisted in the Israeli military, as well as the elderly and the sick, in exchange for all Palestinian female, juvenile, sick, and elderly Palestinian prisoners, as well as 500 prisoners named by Hamas, including those with life sentences and convictions for serious crimes. It would also include intensifying humanitarian aid, moving Israeli forces outside populated areas, a temporary cessation of military operations and aerial reconnaissance, the start of reconstruction work, and allowing the United Nations and its agencies like UNRWA to provide humanitarian services and establish housing camps. Now, they would need to establish housing camps since the IDF has destroyed so many residential buildings in Gaza. We'll get to that in just a bit. Now, it would also see the return of displaced Palestinians to their homes in all areas of the Gaza Strip, and it would also ensure freedom of movement without obstruction by the Israeli government or the IDF. In addition, this first phase would include starting indirect talks on the requirements necessary for a complete ceasefire and negotiations on the details for the second and third phases. Hamas has proposed that the second phase would see the conclusion of talks that would end hostilities, in addition to the release of more hostages held captive in Gaza. During the second phase, all male hostages in Gaza, civilians and military personnel, would be released in exchange for a specified number of Palestinian prisoners, and Israeli forces would have to completely exit the enclave. Now let's get to phase 3. According to what Hamas counteroffered with, phase 3 would aim to exchange bodies and remains of those killed on both sides. It also stipulates that all crossings from the Gaza Strip be opened for trade to resume, and so people can move without obstacles. Israel would commit to provide Gaza with its electricity and water needs. So I mean, even under what Hamas counteroffered, Israel would still have an insane amount of control over the Gaza Strip. I mean, think about it. They would have control over critical things like water and electricity, which has been the case. Now, while initial responses from Blinken and Qatar were reportedly positive, President Joe Biden gave his strained update yesterday during a presser. Let's watch.
There is some movement, and I don't want to, well, maybe choose my words. There's some movement. There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas, but it seems to be a little over the top. We're not sure where it is. There's a continuing negotiation right now.
Yikes. And that was before details of the counterproposal were even shared. Based on Netanyahu's rhetoric, it didn't seem like the proposal by Hamas was likely to go anywhere. And maybe that's why Biden didn't seem so hot on the idea either. He does tend to take cues from Israel's leader rather than, serve as a leader himself, after all. Another foreshadowing sign came on Wednesday, unfortunately, when an Israeli official familiar with the negotiations said that there is no way Israel will accept the Hamas counterproposal. And it looks like that official was absolutely right. Netanyahu did in fact reject the counterproposal outright, saying that Hamas's offer is delusional. Quote, "We haven't committed to anything. We haven't committed to any of the delusional demands of Hamas. The numbers of terrorists with blood on their hands to release. There is not a commitment. There has to be a negotiation. It's a process. And at the moment, from what I see from Hamas, it's not happening. Except there were concessions by Hamas. And this is a negotiation process. It's just that, keep in mind, Benjamin Netanyahu has a conflict of interest here. And the conflict of interest is he wants to remain in power. He has somehow convinced the Israeli people that they should keep him in power, even though they absolutely loathe him, as long as the war continues. So if that's the deal, he's gonna ensure that the war continues as long as humanly possible, because homeboy loves power and he wants to remain in the position he's currently in. He said Israel's aim is complete victory, and the country will not do less than that. I told the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, we are nearly there with complete victory. We are on the way to complete victory. The victory is achievable. It's not a matter of years or decades, it's a matter of months, which is an absolute joke. What does that even mean? How do you defeat Hamas? As you're slaughtering almost every single member of a given family, the family members who remain are going to be incredibly angry. They might want to be out for vengeance as a result of your military wiping out their entire family. I mean, who knows how much this has increased the number of individuals who are willing to be recruited into Hamas. If you look at public opinion polling in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, by the way, support for Hamas has increased as a result of Israel's handling of this war. Then Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated previous statements regarding Israel occupying Gaza in the future. Just spitting in the face of Americans, by the way, the American government that keeps insisting that they do not want Israel to do that. Netanyahu said that he told the US Secretary of State that after we destroy Hamas, we will secure that Gaza is a safe area forever. History has proven that only one force can achieve this, Israel, the IDF and our security forces. Israel will be acting in Gaza whenever necessary in order for the terror not to come back. He also expressed his bitterness over President Joe Biden very mildly condemning settler violence in the West Bank that's been directed toward Palestinians. Some Palestinians have been driven out of their homes as a result. And so 4 of them have been slapped with sanctions. Reporter Barak Ravid stated on X that Netanyahu says he protested to Secretary of State Antony Blinken during their meeting about President Biden's order regarding the countering of settler violence and told him it was inappropriate and highly problematic. Others in the Israeli government, by the way, had similar statements, including Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who reportedly told Blinken that Hamas's response to the hostage deal proposal will push Israel to expand its ground operation in Gaza. He said that the response was drafted in a way that will make Israel reject it. Hamas's position will lead to the continuation of the war and our forces to enter more places in Gaza soon. Let's pause for a second. As if the IDF needed another excuse to continue the absolute brutalization of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. I love the constant talking point that really has like the main message of, well, Hamas made us do it. Did Hamas make the IDF run a disgusting Telegram channel in which IDF soldiers basically put out snuff films and bragged about hearing a mother's bones crunching as they were slaughtering her? Did Hamas force the IDF to do that too? So it looks like despite some initial optimism, the negotiations are going back to square one. And in the meantime, the known Palestinian death toll is nearly 28,000 people after nearly 4 months of war. That includes 123 bodies brought to hospitals in just the last 24 hours, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. And by the way, the death toll that we keep sharing with you, I know people like to say, well, that also includes some of the Hamas militants who have been killed. So it's not 28,000 civilians, like some portion of that includes the Hamas militants who have been killed. Okay, but that figure also doesn't include the Palestinian bodies that remain trapped under the rubble in the Gaza Strip. So fact of the matter is the death toll, the civilian death toll, is very likely higher. A quarter of Gaza's residents are now starving, and 85% of the population has been driven from their homes, with hundreds of thousands crammed in makeshift tent camps. Israel has ordered Palestinians to evacuate areas that make up 2/3 of the tiny coastal territory. Most of the displaced are packed into the southern town of Rafah near the border with Egypt, where many are living in squalid tent camps and overflowing UN-run shelters. The IDF's bombardment has decimated huge swaths of this small territory. Satellite imagery analyzed by the United Nations Satellite Center shows that 30% of Gaza Strip's buildings have been destroyed or damaged in the Israel offensive in the densely populated Palestinian enclave. The center reported that in total, a staggering 69,147 structures, equivalent to approximately 30% of the Gaza Strip's total structures, are affected. And look, that's just one of the most conservative estimates that has been reported thus far. Because if you focus specifically in northern Gaza, between 70 and 80% of the buildings are damaged or destroyed. But the IDF has continued intense military operations in the south, including Rafah, which was of course originally billed as a safe haven for Palestinians. Now the situation there is becoming increasingly dire.
Rafah is the last refuge, sheltering more than half of Gaza's 2.3 million people. Now it too is in Israel's firing line. But American Dr. Michael Grady is used to working in conflict zones.
You can hear shooting to the left and to the right.
They receive patients from all across Gaza. Last week, 39 critically injured all at once.
Well, you can imagine this location became a mass of screaming, chaotic people.
But still, these doctors perform wonders with only 2 emergency operating rooms.
The other day, we had a patient who came in with an amputated leg, and his friend brought his leg in a bag.
So that is what Palestinians are currently dealing with, while Benjamin Netanyahu pretends like he's engaging in ceasefire negotiations in good faith. It's clear to me, and it's been clear to me since the beginning of this war, that he has really no concern for the Palestinian people, of course, but he doesn't even have concern for the Israeli hostages who remain captive in the Gaza Strip. Because when he puts out unfounded claims about UNRWA, the UN agency that provides humanitarian aid, food, water, sustenance to the Palestinian people, when he puts out those fake, allegations with no evidence to back them up, and more than a dozen Western countries pull their funding from that agency, he knows that it's not just the Palestinian people who are going to starve to death as a result. It's also the Israeli civilians who are held captive in the Gaza Strip. All he cares about is his own power. He bragged about how his leadership would keep Israel safe, and he dropped the ball in the worst possible way on October 7th. The worst terror attack on Israeli soil happened under his watch. And now he is using this war that was sparked as a result of his failures to remain in power. And he keeps talking about defeating Hamas, a group that he propped up, a group that he himself funded and persuaded the Likud party to be in favor of funding. That's who Benjamin Netanyahu is. So if you want to call Hamas terrorists, that's fine. But what do you call the guy who funded the terrorists? You should ask yourself that.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.